You get to respond to him.
The key issue is whether you can trust a politician with democratic authority. You're a prime minister who shut down Parliament twice. You were twice ruled against by the Speaker of the House of Commons. You lost the confidence of the House of Commons because you were found in contempt, because you didn't tell the House of Commons the truth. You're walking around now trying to claim the right to a majority. You haven't earned the right to a majority because you don't respect our democratic institutions. We've got to find a leader strong enough to live and accept and welcome democratic freedom in this country instead of trying to shut it down.
Well, Mr. Ignatieff, I know what your attacks are on this government. I simply don't accept the truth of those attacks. This government has governed through difficult times, through 5 years of minority government. We couldn't do that unless we respected Parliament, unless we respected the democratic process. We have a strong record on that. And what we are asking in an election we didn't want, in an election Canadians didn't want, we're asking Canadians to make the decision. Do you want to have this kind of bickering? Do you want to have another election in 2 years? Or do you want
bickering? This is a debate, Mr. Harper. This is democracy.
We have before Parliament measures to help our most vulnerable senior citizens, measure to give tax credits to families for arts programs, to help to extend work sharing, which is save the jobs of 300,000 workers, measures to help our manufacturing sector.
Once again,
that's what we want.
20 seconds left in this segment, Mr. Layton.
Passing, that's the mandate.
Well, Mr. Layton,
I have to pick up on something Mr. Ignatieff said. He said before you have to walk the walk and you have to be a strong leader and respect Parliament. I've got to ask you then, why do you have the worst attendance record in the House of Commons of any member of Parliament? If you want to be Prime Minister, you better learn how to be a member of Parliament first. Most Canadians, if they don't show up for work, they don't get a promotion.
Mr. Layton, I don't surrender to anybody in my respect for the institution of Parliament and my obligation to the people who put me there. So don't give me lessons about respect for democracy.
Well,
don't give me lessons.
Where
don't
were
give
you
me
when
lessons
I was
for
there
respect
standing up to Mr. Harper and voting against his policies, and you weren't in the chamber? You missed 70% of the votes. I think you need to understand a little bit more about how our democracy works. That's my only point.
But Mr. Layton, if I
hang on, Mr. Ignatieff's got one last word on this, and we got to move on, or we're going to get way behind. 20 seconds to respond, please.
The key question here is to get a government that respects a minority. The question is, who's going to replace you, Mr. Harper? It's going to be, in my view, I'm seeking the support for a Liberal government enacting Liberal policies.
Okay, that's it. That's it. Gentlemen, I got to move on. Question 4 is about immigration and multiculturalism. Monsieur Duceppe, you have a one-on-one with Mr. Layton in this segment. Monsieur Duceppe gets the first response, and we go here to Montreal for the next tape. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Jade Calvert. I'm a student here in Montreal at McGill University. As a leader, how do you envision the social makeup of our country over the next 30 years? Where do you stand on reasonable accommodation? Do you think that new immigrants to our country should adopt the social practices of Canadians who are already living here, or not?
Okay, Monsieur Duceppe.
I think it's a very good question. We have quite a debate in Quebec on that issue, and a commission named Taylor Bouchard. And the conclusion of that commission is that the multiculturalism system in Canada doesn't fit with Quebec, because we think that we have to integrate the immigrants, respecting them because they're modifying our society, and it's a plus. My grandfather was a home child. My mother's name Rolly, so I don't have any problem. When I go to Canada, a lot of times I say I'm a bloke who turned black, so I don't have anything against immigration. But the multiculturalism doesn't fit with Quebec. We're only 2% of Francophones within North America, largely Hispanophone and Anglophone. We have to integrate the immigrants and build a society where a Quebecer is a Quebecer is a Quebecer without any exception.
Mr. Layton.
Well, thank you for the question, and I believe that we are going to have, Jade, continued waves of immigration. Here in Canada, we don't reproduce our own population sufficiently rapidly for us to grow our economy, and so we're going to be attracting people. And besides, who wouldn't want to come and live in this beautiful country of ours? I'm lucky enough to be in a family that came here from Hong Kong, and I got to marry Olivia as a result of that. Thank goodness we had the kind of policies that encouraged families to come here to Canada. One of the most disturbing aspects of what the Harper government is doing is that they're encouraging more and more people to come here as temporary foreign workers. They come here alone and they work for up to 3 years for some company. and they send the money back home, and then they go back home. And that's not how we built this country. I say family reunification is the key thing. And we now have families who have been applying to come here to bring their mother over to Canada, sometimes waiting 10, 12, 13 years. And they are unable to come here. There are cases where grandparents pass away before they can come and hold their grandchild. That is wrong. We need to put resources into encouraging those folks to be able to come here and be part of their family. And that would be a strong priority for a New Democrat government.
Well, one thing I should say, Mr. Layton, that I just can't accept is the will of that government to create two categories of refugees. We can't accept that. People coming here are coming because they have a lot of difficulties, political difficulties or economic difficulties in their countries. Sometimes it's a question of to stay alive or to die. And I saw those scandalous ads made by the Tories, a ship coming in Canada. It made me remember those boat people. They came in that kind of ship, ships. And those people were fleeing from Vietnam and Cambodia. And now they're good Quebec citizens. This is a plus to the Quebec society. But when I see those kind of ads identifying those people like criminals, there's no other words for that. I just can't accept that. And I think that we have to oppose that. And if he's got a majority, then we'll have that kind of policy. Two categories of refugees.
I believe that we will find, if Mr. Harper hopefully won't have power after the next election, because I've seen these policies develop over the last number of years, and what we're seeing is more and more of this focus on the immigrant as some kind of an economic unit, so that we can squeeze as much out as we can. We don't give them the professional certification. They end up coming here. They're brought here with the inducement that perhaps with their professional credentials, training as doctors and professionals of all kinds, that perhaps they'd be able to find that kind of work here. And they come here and the door is slammed in their face. And New Democrats have been pushing hard for measures to be taken. And one of the most important measures is to create an opportunity for one of those well-trained workers to work in a mentorship context with some Canadian worker and professional who's already working in that area, so that they can get that Canadian experience. And that's got to be one of the top priorities. And by the way, that would also make sure that we would have a lot more doctors and medical professionals very quickly available to the 5 million Canadians that don't have medical care right now from a family doctor.
Mr. Layton, since you recognize that Quebec is a nation, then I ask you, will you then give Quebec full power over immigration, and also the right to have its own policy concerning integration of the immigrants? Since the Bouchard-Taylor Commission was very clear, multiculturalism doesn't fit with Quebec's interest and Quebec's future. Would you agree that Quebec should have the right to determine its own policy and have full power over immigration,
well,
since
course,
we're a nation?
Of course, Quebec right now has very extensive control over its own immigration, and that's important because if we talk about Quebec, I was born and raised in Quebec, and here is a wonderful part of our country where the French language is the language. Wonderful part of our country where the French language is the language of work, and it's the language of culture.
Not everywhere, you know that.
No, well, and that's why the NDP put forward legislation so that could happen.
So you would agree that Bill 101 applied to all workers in Quebec?
And we have
Bill
proposed,
101 applied to all workers.
and we have proposed that in the House for all federally regulated.
So Bill 101.
Thomas Mulcair, yes, has made exactly that proposal.
But I want to hear you. Do you agree that Bill 101 should apply to all economic sectors in Quebec?
Well, and we're taking action on precisely that,
So you're
Mr.
proposing
Duceppe.
that Bill 101 will apply?
We have said that those kind of that kind of framework should apply, for example, to workers in
I'm not talking about that kind of framework. I'm talking very precisely about Bill 101. Should it apply to all economic sectors? Because it doesn't apply to telecommunication, transportation, and the banks.
Mr. Duceppe, you know that we have put legislation before the House of Commons to do exactly what you've asked.
No.
Yes,
Well,
it does.
No.
Yes, it does.
Gentlemen, if I may, let me jump in here.
Who's going to rule that?
That's the 6 minutes for the one-on-one.
That way we can preserve the French language in Quebec, which is very, very important.
Okay, we broadened it out to all four leaders now. Mr. Ignatieff, then Mr. Harper.
I want to get back to Jade's